Okay, good morning and welcome to our Tuesday, January 25th, 2022 CEO briefing. It is 9 a.m. Let the record reflect that all three commissioners are present. We have our executive management team, and we are also joined by Shelley O'Quinn from the Inovio Foundation and Arian Schmidt. Shelley, I did want to ask, is there anyone else that you would like promoted?
There are. We need Jean Chasen, Sam Radford. Erin, do you know the name of the deputy mayor off the top of your head?
Jean Chasen. Let me look up their names really quick.
Jean.
Yes. Ellen Grant is the,
thank you, Ellen Grant.
Okay, well, welcome and thank you for joining us today. We very much appreciate it. And Shelley, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Fantastic. Thank you for taking time to allow us to join you today and share with you an initiative that we've been working on for almost 3 years now that is actually going to launch in March. And just want to make sure that you're brought up to speed, but more importantly, because you've heard the details from us in what this looks like, we then want to actually translate this to have you have a chance to speak with some folks from Buffalo who can tell you after 10 years what it has done for their community. Because I think it's one thing to have the look at an outline of a proposal, and it's another to say, okay, what does it look like 10 years later? And so as you're aware, we have been working on a supported promise scholarship for a region with the bold promise that every child would have both the opportunity and support to pursue their post-secondary education and career of choice. And so that's technical, 2-year, 4-year certificate program. But truly, we all know that when you look at the data, having some sort of post-secondary education more than doubles your earning power over the lifetime. And so not only are you impacting student and families' lives, then that all then translates to needed workforce development for our community and significant economic development for our region. And so it's not an education initiative, it's actually a community initiative that happens to use education as the tool to advance student and family success and to advance our community. And so I'm not going to go into those details. Instead, I'm going to turn it over to Jean Chasen, who is our consultant, who has actually, this whole model is based on a model called Say Yes to Education, and we're stealing some of the key components of that model. And Jean launched those communities, and then Jean will introduce our two guests who will share with you the experience that they've had in their communities. So Jean, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Shelley. I'm very pleased to be with you this morning. My name is Jean Chasen. I am the president of a nonprofit national organization called Community Catalyst Partners. And we exist to work with communities across the country to develop the local economy, vibrant local economies, and we use education as the key vehicle to do that. In a nutshell, we work with communities to put a scholarship in place. The scholarship gets a great deal of attention, but the real work and the effort really is catalyzed by the scholarship, but the real work is in realigning the assets and resources across the community in order to drive healthier families and better student outcomes. So we use the scholarship both to communicate that finances are not a barrier to post-secondary access, but as importantly, as a lever to compel the various parties who typically don't work together, school district, cities, counties, local philanthropy, higher ed institutions, leadership from the community, parent leadership, teachers union leadership, all working together to figure out how to scale and support young people and families across the region. This whole approach is driven by a data model that's constantly informing refinement of the services that families need, and also used as a key accountability metric with the broad community. What that drives is a full array of supports, and the kind of supports that have been rolled out in the 5 communities we have done this in include not just scholarships, but also post-secondary access programming, support for families in completing the financial aid paperwork that's necessary to access scholarships, support for the application process to post-secondary institutions, retention supports or persistence supports in the higher ed institutions that get the most underprepared students, tutoring, after-school programming, summer programming, mental health clinics located where students and families can access them, case managers in the school buildings, and in the case of Buffalo, Syracuse, the communities we've launched, at least 1 case manager per school, and in many cases 2 and 3 case managers per school, mobile health clinics, parenting centers, and the list goes on and on, but that's the core of what you see as this programming rolls out. What it's driven in our communities is dramatically increased enrollment in the public school system, dramatically increased high school graduation rates, significant increases in post-secondary matriculation, post-secondary persistence, and post-secondary completion, and a reduction in the amount of students going into remedial programming. And by that, I mean programming like foster care. In Onondaga County, where Syracuse is located, in the first 4 years of the program, they realized a 43% reduction in the number of students being placed in foster care. And that was a result of getting early intervention to the families, working with them before it became a crisis. They saw similar reductions in ed neglect and suspected child abuse referrals. So going back to Shelley's original point, yes, education is the initial focus, but the real story is in leveraging those scholarships to harness the resources that exist in the community and in order to drive healthier students and students that are able to access those scholarships. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues who have lived this on the ground. I'm going to start with Ellen Grant, who is the deputy mayor in Buffalo and was when we launched this initiative. Mayor Brown's been in office for quite a while there, and the story of Buffalo and the improvements in Buffalo are remarkable. So I'm happy to turn it over to Ellen.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Happy to be with you today. And I'll just give you a little bit of my background. I've got about 35 years experience in health, behavioral health, academia. I'm former commissioner of mental health for Erie County, population of about 1 million. I had responsibility for health, behavioral health, substance abuse, and alcohol, and mental retardation and developmental disabilities, it was called at that time, family court, and forensic mental health. So I've been with the mayor's office first initially 3 years. Then I worked with Jean at Say Yes National for about 2 years, 2.5 years, then came back to the mayor's office where I've been for almost 2 years again. So I'm Buffalo born and bred, raised, educated here. So very, very familiar with the community. The mayor, Byron Brown, is starting his 5th successful term, so to speak. It's 4 years term, so he's been in office for 20 years. But before he came here, he's always had an interest in education. Starting out from the council, Common Council in Buffalo, he set up a program called a summer reading program. And this past summer, we just had our 21st year of engaging students from around the community in the process and engagement of reading and how it can obviously enhance your educational abilities. So when the mayor heard about this program, he really was all in. He engaged with other members in the community, with foundations, with union leadership, other elected officials. And it has been a wonderful labor of love, quite frankly. We've been working with the school system, say yes to education for a long, long time. And just to talk about the partnership that we formed with other folks to get around the table, as Jean mentioned, as you know, speed only, you probably heard that quote, that's change only works at the speed of trust. Change only works at the speed of trust. And it took us a long time to get to that stage. I'm sure you've also heard of Tuckman's 4 stages of forming a group. Well, we went through all of them: the forming, the storming, the norming, and then finally the performing. So 11 years with folks around the table from all aspects of the community leadership, though, the president of the union, the school board president, various college presidents around the table, the parents group. It's all been 11 years, all in. We're still meeting at the table once or twice a month, depends on the weather sometimes, but when the weather prohibits us from getting together, we're on Zoom. I would say that if you were to ask me, how does the city of Buffalo lean on Say Yes for support for families and others in the community? Jean mentioned the school support specialists that we have. We call them family support specialists, which are in every single school in our community. They provide everything from being the linchpin from the school to the parent to other resources in the community. We have legal clinics in the schools. We have where the lawyers deal with everything from immigration to divorce to other issues, of legal, landlord issues, etc. And if I were to say how investing in education has grown our community, grown our economy, so to speak, in Buffalo, we have data that shows for every $1 increase in the number of Buffalo adults with a bachelor's degree, an additional 198 million of disposable income is added into our economy annually. The projected needs of the Buffalo employers, we know that in 10 years, we're going to have almost 200,000 open positions, and 64% of those will need a secondary education. So obviously, Say Yes and working with the schools, working with Jean again in the new program, the new organization that he's formed it continues to be high on our list.
Thanks, Ellen. That's great. And I'd now like to introduce Sam Radford. When I first heard about Buffalo and heard about their interest in working with us, I went up to pay a visit. And when I arrived at the hotel, I turned on the television to watch the local news. And there was this guy on the steps of City Hall telling parents to keep their children home from school in protest of the conditions in the school system. That person was Sam Radford, and immediately we called one of the leaders at the John R. Oshai Foundation, Blythe Merrill, and I said to Blythe, we have to have Sam Radford at the table with us. And she fully agreed. I think you'll see why in just a minute. Sam, if you could talk about your experience working with this kind of initiative and what it's meant on the ground in the community, we'd be grateful.
Thank you so much, Jean. And Ellen, hi, good seeing you. It is such an honor. I get excited every time I get a chance to speak about what this experience has been like. First of all, which ones are the commissioners? I just want to be able to kind of I know we are in an informal setting. I want to kind of be able to make contact with who I'm talking to. Okay, so I see 2 of the commissioners there. Okay. So
And Commissioner French the A French is our other commissioner.
Okay, got you. Hi, Commissioner French. All right, so listen, Jean talked about when he first met me, and let me just give you a little bit of real quickly of my background. I'm going to try to do in 5 minutes, something that I experienced over 11 years. And that's extremely hard to do, but I'm going to do my absolute best at it because I've been at this for 30 years. I mean, I've been a parent leader in Buffalo since 1990. And so by the time we got to that date that Jean is talking about in May of 2011, I had already been doing this for 20 years. And so, essentially, like Ellen said, when the mayor came to us and talked to us about, the possibility of this, this initiative being started in Buffalo, we were dealing with a situation where, Buffalo had like a 45% graduation rate, and it was just oscillating between 40 and 50%. In the minority community, that was 20. We had 50 consecutive years of less than 25% graduation rate for our African-American males. And it just was not a hopeful environment. I mean, the reality was only certain kids was going to college, and it just really wasn't, the kids in the community that, I was primarily serving in. And so we felt like ultimately, if we kept sending our children to school, we were as a much part of the problem as a system that we sending our kids to. So we decided to withdraw participation. And so in that withdrawing of participation, we felt like we could draw attention to the fact that what we're doing right now is just simply not working, and we have to do something different. So either way it goes, the mayor came, like Ellen said, and he talked to us about this opportunity that was going to come with the Say Yes initiative. And, and I tell us that I'm hesitant about doing it, but I tell us to politicians whenever I'm talking to politicians, I like the mayor. The mayor is my friend. Ellen knows that. But the reality is my experience has been when a politician tells you something that's too good to be true, it usually is too good to be true. And so what he was saying to us really was too good to be true. He was saying to us, we would have this initiative where all of our children, not just the kids, not just the haves, not just the kids who did well academically, but all of our children, whether they went to a charter school or a public school, all of our children will have opportunity to go to college. And having been over that 20-year period, having been part of multiple initiatives of what we were going to do to change the schools and make them better, to have better graduation rates, to have better college going, rates, to having better college graduation rates. All those initiatives have been started by one group or another. They have been started over and over again. And we were just past the point of, those promises. And so we came to the table and mind you, being really frank with you, I did not expect us to keep a seat at the table because, again, we were outside protesting. We were attacking the school district. We were not partnering or collaborating. So I didn't think that the table would allow for that. But what we really found when we got to the table, much to our shock, is we found an honest broker. An honest broker who was at the table who said that we had to have a seat at the table and our voice mattered just as much as everybody else's voices, which was not the typical thing. Generally, whoever has the most power at the table kind of dictates, how the conversation goes. So generally that's the union or the business community, all the players. It's definitely not the parents, so we definitely don't usually have an equal voice, but we were given a seat at the table. And to Ellen's point, she said it beautifully. She said change happens at the speed of trust. And we did not trust each other in the beginning. So in the beginning, this was not a quick process where, this changed overnight. But after, 2 or 3 years at the table, where what we found out by being at the table together was essentially that, even though we had different constituencies and different approaches, that we really all had the same goal. We had more in common than we had in difference. And so what happened over that 2-year period is we did learn to trust each other. We did learn how to work together. We did learn how to prioritize putting our children's needs first. And it wasn't easy. I mean, we went through 7 superintendents and interim superintendents in 5 years. So if you can imagine, what that looks like going through that kind of volatility, and then we're trying to bring things in, implement things that had not been done before. But I mean, I can give a bunches of examples of how special that was, where we had to solve problems, whether it was after school programs, whether it was the legal issues, whether it was, with the family support specialists, all kind of problems we had to solve, the summer camp issue. We had to solve problems that really brought us together as a collaborative governance body that was able to make change in a way that to make a long story short, over the last 10 years, and it's really interesting to hear Gene talk about it to y'all in the beginning phases, because I remember that in Buffalo, but now I have the honor to be here at the end of it, not the end of it, but 10 years later, and look back and say, wow, all that stuff really did happen. All that stuff can happen. And it did make it better, because now where we're standing here, I had an opportunity to come to Spokane 2 years ago. And at that time, I told you that that over the last 9 years at that point, Buffalo had went from a 45% graduation rate to a 65% graduation rate at that time. We had our highest graduation rate in our history. Since then, we have been through a pandemic, and over those last 2 years, we have gone up to a 76% graduation rate in the middle of a pandemic. You know what I'm saying? That's because there's an infrastructure in place that continues to work, that continues to do the things that we need to do to, make the school system way better than we found it. And so I'm excited about hearing where y'all at the beginning of the process, because I know what was possible in Buffalo is possible there. And I'm excited to be part of this process to bring about that change.
Hey, Sam, you do such a great job of articulating what has been the impact in the minority and low-income community.
To me, that's where the biggest impact is at, because obviously, Buffalo, third poorest city in the country, you didn't have a high college going. Let's not even talk about the concrete data. Let's just talk about just the culture. You didn't have a high college going expectation in the minority and low income communities. And so what happened is we over a couple of years, we saw a paradigm shift where people who didn't even think about going to college, their parents didn't go to college, their parents didn't go to college. So there was just no expectation of going to college. And in the beginning, even in the beginning here, there was not a real, people didn't believe this stuff. People didn't believe this was real, that, everybody gets to go to college. It took time for people to come to terms that, no, this is real. And so we have seen that change. And when I say you see that change, you can feel it in the community. Going to the barbershop, you hear barbers talking about, the barbers have the say yes signs up to asking the kids, what college you going to? And asking the kid with an expectation of a conversation to come back, because we all know you get to go to college. So it ain't about, whether you can or not. How are you doing in school? Are you on track to graduate? Kids that go to college and come back, how are you doing? Are you going to be able to graduate? How are you working with other kids? So that whole culture. Here, I'm part of the church community, the faith leaders, listening to faith leaders compete on who got the most kids going to college, who got the kids going to the best colleges. You know what I'm saying? Just a whole paradigm shift from, in my opinion, where low-income, families did not expect or plan or anticipate going to college to where they do. One of the most simple things I noticed at one of our district parent coordinating council meetings, 2015, 16, 17, was this whole emphasis on all of a sudden people who normally did not have to do taxes. Just because of their income, they didn't have to do taxes. All of a sudden, people having to get their taxes done because they have to get their FAFSA done. And now we had to help and support parents do that process, was a big shift in the culture. So a lot of things that, ultimately led to parents being more empowered took place in the low-income and minority communities.
Thanks, Sam. I want to point out, because, commissioners, you may, and Scott and others on this, you may be seeing there thinking, well, we don't have a graduation problem. This is great, but we don't have a graduation problem. And I would encourage you to look past the fact that this is not just about, in Buffalo, they had a high school graduation problem. In our community, we have a post-secondary attainment and a workforce development problem. We graduate our kids and up in the 80, 90% on most of our high schools in our region. But when you look at the data, literally only 40% of students have some form of post-secondary education by the time they're 26. So our gap is that an opportunity is that huge gap between that, 90-some% graduation and from high school to the fact that only 40% of them are going on to actually achieve some sort of post-secondary degree. And it's not just a Rogers problem or a, you name a low-income high school problem. You look at Meade, you look at Central Valley, those high schools reflect the same demographics. We are not sending our kids on and preparing them for the workforce that we need in this community. Our state has a goal of 70% post-secondary attainment, but the true number is, if we look, 80% of the jobs in our region and in our state will require some form of post-secondary education, 80%. So we have this massive gap, and that all translates into a significant workforce development, economic development issue if we're not addressing the post-secondary attainment. And then you layer onto that the fact that we have an enrollment cliff coming in 2025. Nationally, all universities, colleges and universities are going to see a decline in enrollment because of the fact that people quit having babies back in 2008. And that enrollment decline continues for 20 to 30 years before it straightens itself out. So we can either continue to battle and fight for that same workforce that everyone else in our country is fighting for, or we can invest in growing our own and have create our local economic impact. And I think, Erin, you had a couple of comments that you wanted to make as well.
Well, and I think, you know, a lot of this is personal testimony. We're starting out on this, knowing all the things that we have as hurdles, and to hear what Ellen and Sam are saying of we've done it, you know, don't despair. It's gonna be worth it. And what I'd like for either Jean or Sam or Ellen to share is the kids that receive this investment not only are encouraged to pursue their secondary education and finish it, and I want to make sure that that's an important piece of this, and that the family that they leave at home will have support so that they don't have to worry about, if I don't keep my part-time job because I'm going to college, there's going to be food on the table, or there's going to be help from my mom to get their GED, or my little brother in 5th grade is going to start learning about new realities that I didn't learn about till high school. And what I have learned that has been amazing to me, that really resonated with what Shelley was talking about in our business community, is the kids that are invested in come back to their communities, and they are filling the voids that we have as folks who have been invested in and have cultivated that ownership of, now that I'm coming back, I'm going to invest myself. And I think really that is probably the most powerful seed in economic drivers. And I wanted to make sure if you had any questions, or if Sam, Jean, or Ellen, you wanted to expound a little more on that.
Yes, you're saying with kids during this pandemic, especially, some of them dropping out of school because they needed a job right away to support their families, was very real in the Buffalo community. But what we started about a little over 2 years ago was a paid scholarship, a paid internship program, working with the businesses to provide income while those kids were encouraged to continue their college education. Working with the mayor's office, we also provided support. We have a strong program called Boys and Men of Color, and who are largely impacted by the unemployment issue because of the pandemic. So we encourage them to stay in school. We paid them to stay in school. We even paid kids to go to summer school in Buffalo because we're so invested in the education. So that's my 2 cents worth. Sam, you can add if you like.
Go ahead, Gene.
Let me, one comment and observation. This is really about developing local muscle. The programming looks different in every community based on the strengths, needs, and assets. And what is common, we've worked with 5 different communities now around the country, and we're working with 2 others in addition currently. But all of those communities are still with it. We began this work in Onondaga County, Syracuse, New York in 2007, Buffalo in 2011, Guilford County, North Carolina in about 2015, Cleveland in 2019. All of those communities, you find that table meeting every 2 to 3 weeks, figuring out how to scale the supports and meet the local needs. And those needs are evolving constantly. So this really is marathon work, and this is designed and built so that people will be at the table and keep working it in perpetuity. Sam?
Yeah, and it's amazing. I'm glad you asked that question because just as a person on the ground, just seeing how this affects parents, that's really what's going on. People are coming back to Buffalo, and really the kind of supports you need when your child goes to college. Again, when you're a first generation college student, you don't know what you don't know. And not only do you not know what you don't know, your parents don't know what you don't know. And so there was there was a need for supports and adjustments, over time. And now the relationship building around making sure kids understand what they need to know when they go there. And that whole kind of, transition, the continuum to make sure that we're passing that information back is kind of the culture that goes on in Buffalo right now. It used to be a lot of people would come to Buffalo and go to school, then they would leave. We got 26 colleges and universities in the Western New York area. Now people don't leave no more. People come here and they stay here. It used to be, people in Buffalo, our Buffalo public schools didn't get into a University of Buffalo or didn't get into our better colleges. Now, all of a sudden, you see people from our school system getting into our universities locally. So you see all those, and it didn't happen overnight. I'm not suggesting that, and I'm not suggesting that it's been easy, but it's continually changing. Again, I like the way Shelley said that. We were dealing with a high school graduation issue, and now we're dealing with, because now the graduation rate is going up. Now what we're dealing with is the persistence issue. You know what I'm saying? That has in our face. Now we got to figure out how to help students persist. Now we got to figure out how to make sure kids are graduating, all of which is part of our growing process. But we took a significant, step forward in the graduation rate, so we can do those other things now.
And I want to point out that in case you don't remember, because I believe, I don't remember if it was Commissioner French or Kearns, I don't know which one of you was involved in Project 100. But when they came to town, if you remember, that we did not get that company, but Buffalo was one of our major competitors in that recruitment project. And so, I mean, whoever thought no offense to those of you from Buffalo, but whoever thought we'd be competing with Buffalo when it came to recruiting companies. And we lost the Project 100 company. And I don't know if Buffalo was the one that landed that one, but I know that we did not. And it was a big, I think it's a good eye opener.
Sounds familiar to me.
We have a different name for it probably than you guys did.
Oh.
So that was our local name, since we protect the anonymity of the company, but we did not land that company. And I know a major issue on that was workforce development. So I want to pause. I do want to close with just some logistics for our upcoming launch, but I do want to make sure we've done a lot of talking. And I want to give the commissioners or Scott an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have.
So I'll see if my other two commissioners want to go first, Commissioner Kearns or Commissioner French. Yep. Okay, Commissioner Kearns.
I'll just throw out kind of a question. I mean, I know New York, very different than Washington State. Washington State, our Article 9, Section 1 of the Washington State Constitution says it's the paramount duty of the state to make ample provisions for the education of all children residing within its borders without discrimination or preference on account of race, color, caste, or sex. I mean, are we essentially letting the state off the hook to something that is their responsibility, for an education initiative like this, and pushing it more to the local level and sort of the philanthropic level, when it's something that's clearly spelled out in the state constitution that's the responsibility of the state?
Our state constitution, that's the responsibility of the state for K-12 education. Not for post-secondary. So this
you were talking about a lot of services that would be targeted towards the kids that are in the K-12 system, working through in the goal to then reach the secondary education, right. Post-secondary education.
So as you know, a lot of what makes students and families successful is non-academic support. So I believe our school districts and our state are actually doing a good job investing in the academic support pieces. That's why our graduation rates are they're in the upper 90% of on-time graduation for our high schools. We're doing a great job on the graduation side. We are not adequately preparing students for post-secondary education and careers. And when you look at that gap that I talked about between, that 90, I think Meade and Central Valley are at like 99% on-time graduation. And Rogers is up towards 90. So we're doing a great job, but then you look at that 40% that's going on and completing some sort of post-secondary education. That's a huge gap. That's a workforce issue. And that's having a significant impact on our businesses and our local economy. And that is not a state issue. But many families, as you know, look at the post-secondary education, they think, well, I can't afford college. I can't afford that. It's not for my kids. And when you can change that dynamic in the conversation at the dinner table, where suddenly every child, regardless of income or the neighborhood they're born into or their race, every child has this opportunity to go after and pursue their goals and their dreams. I mean, this is a last dollar scholarship. So it actually builds off the state opportunity scholarship. It would not work. If we were trying to come in and fund everything ourselves, it wouldn't work. But it's building off of what state and federal need grants do, and we're filling the gap for those students and those families. So it's getting them to the next step. In Buffalo, their issue was high school completion. Our issue is post-secondary education, which translates to workforce and economic development. Jean, I can see you want to say something.
A couple of things. First of all, in terms of the non-academic supports, really what this is doing is building connecting tissue between the various silos that are serving families already. And it's finding ways to make effective, efficient use of those resources across the silos. So when we talk about the provision of supports, it may involve rethinking where you're delivering a service. It may be scaling a service that's already provided across an entire community, but it's making efficient, effective use of what's already there in terms of resources. On the post-secondary piece, I would suggest, given that we do this work across the country, the real issue is post-secondary readiness. The state tests look dramatically different from state to state. In New York State, they have Regents exams that do align with post-secondary acceptance in the state, where other states are different. But what is the common denominator is students being post-secondary ready.
Commissioner Kearns, I do think you're onto something, and Jean said that, is we are using in a lot of ways this parallel synergies of issuing those last gap dollars to the student, but really that being the vehicle for understanding, and as Jean said, coordinating my favorite topic, and that is regional collaborations that we have going on in our community that are in, like a lot of other areas, happening in independent verticals. And so the seed money for the kind of programmatic side gives the different entities in education, in nonprofit, in local government, the ability to try out some of these new ways of collaborated coordination, so that as they see how that reaps benefits that they couldn't have done if they stayed in their current state, they will be willing then in the future to maybe adjust operating models, adjust internal budgets, adjust solicitations for other types of funding. So it really is playing in the new paradigm in a way that doesn't require you to let go of everything that you're doing today so that you can experience it.
So Shelley, I've got a comment and question, talking about the family support specialist, because I've had conversations here recently locally about the need for that. And I think then that can speak to Josh's concern as well, that those are not academic. Those are, family support specialists that you're putting into the schools that is truly helping those parents and those kids then start to see a difference of what their future can be and meet the parents where their needs are, because if it is food, if it is legal. So can you speak to what you're doing? Because I think I'm hearing, different things here from, the zone project that they're trying to get some families support specialists into a couple of the elementary schools, kind of what those individuals have helped your community, because that's that, economic impact that I see from a whole different perspective, because we know economic development and impacts are, with businesses and all that, but it also starts at the ground up. And so been thinking about that a lot as I talk to the zone project, and just seeing who's paying for those and how are those integrated into the system.
Yeah, let me speak to that. First of all, the vast majority of family support specialists in the 5 communities we've worked with are MSW, Masters of Social Work. That's the background they come into it with. I'll give Cleveland, our most recent city, as an example of how it's been paid for. About 52% of the dollars that fund those positions are federal dollars that Cleveland was not drawing down previously, foster care prevention dollars. It's been matched by dollars that the county was already putting into case managers for families that were on the active caseload for being at risk. And then the balance of the funds were funds that the school district had already been investing for social workers. So over 50% of it, federal dollars, a little over 30% of it came from county dollars that were already being expended for that function, and then filled out with social work dollars from the school district. The work they do, though, is hands-on work with the families. They maintain active caseloads. So when they may be assigned to a school, but when you go into the school and look for the family support specialists during the day, they're out in the neighborhood knocking on doors, working directly with parents and families and intervening on things like food insufficiency or housing issues, helping them to get situated. The other piece of the story, and I'll kick it over to Sam and Ellen to talk a little about this. As we've gone through this pandemic, those family support specialists have been critical in maintaining our families and helping to support them during this period where students were not in school. It was hard for them to access the online learning. And those family support specialists in all of our communities, there have been stories in the newspapers about the role they played in keeping the families going. Sam, Ellen, you want to comment on Buffalo specifically around that?
Yeah, if there's one thing that, obviously everybody had a role to play, but I think one of the most significant factors that led to the increased graduation rate was the family support specialists. Because they were the ones that were able to be out there, looking at the underlying condition that was causing the problem with the student being able to engage, the student being able to learn, and being able to get the child through those, getting over those humps and work with that family. And so it's the piece that you can't see all the time, but it's really the difference maker. It's been the one that helped the parents to be able to, figure out how to get the kid, get the child ready for college, to understand what you need to do, when the child, gets to there for the first semester, and just really work you through that process. And the significance of what they do is because it's on a case-by-case basis. It's not, something where you in advance what you're going to have to do. They really are figuring out what you need to do. And when you're dealing, in this case, with people that's been in generational poverty, that is real work. And to me, it's the difference makers. It's really what has got us to this place where we've had the paradigm shift. Now you have people who are hopeful as opposed to hopeless.
Right. I'll also add, during the pandemic, as you can imagine, the mental health needs, the emotional needs of our kids, it increased threefold. We had our family support specialists really holding a lot of these families together. From everything from housing to getting them linked with behavioral health, doing some themselves right online with the kids, just to keep, some stability in the family and in the community. So I can't speak highly enough of them.
Making sure every child ate, make sure every child had a device, making sure every child had an adequate internet connection, all the things that would normally be a breakdown where learning would be affected. You had somebody paying attention to that and making sure that those bridges were linked.
Oh, go ahead, Shelley.
I was just going to say, I think what's really important to think about is, student success is actually more dependent on the external realities that they're living than it is on what's happening in the school. If they are hungry, if they don't know where they're going to sleep that night, if they're being abused at home, if their parents aren't there because they're working 3 jobs just to figure out how to keep the lights on, the realities that those students and those families face, those realities will have much more impact on whether or not a student's going to succeed. And if we can wrap around them and provide some support, some community support to ensure that when they show up at school, that they can actually focus on school, they're going to be more likely to get across that finish line and be a productive member of our society, and therefore return that economic impact to our community. Otherwise, it's either, I look at it as we're making a long-term investment into our community so we can address some of those problems that we're dealing with today. When we look at the priorities in our community, and we're dealing with a huge homelessness and housing instability issue in our community. This is that long-term investment to help solve that problem. We're also going to be bringing folks together to work in a different way on that short-term impact too. And that's what I love about this model, is that this model is looking at the now, as well as making an investment for, as in Buffalo's case, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and beyond.
So Shelley, one more question for you. My husband's a general contractor, union contractor. And so it's not that not every kid wants to go on to college. And on Hutton Settlements Board, I see that with our kids there. And so I guess I would like you to speak to what the other opportunities are. That is not just going to college. It's letting them know that that's an opportunity if they want it, but there's other opportunities. So and workforce development.
We've been saying career and college of choice, because then whatever that career is that they select. So if they want to be a home builder or an electrician or a welder, or they want to be a dental assistant or even the dentist, they're going to pick their career and then the associated college of choice. And so that may be a certificate program, that may be a technical program, it may be an apprenticeship program, 2-year, 4-year, beyond. So we've really flipped the language around to say the career and college of choice. So whatever that college piece is that they're picking, so college is inclusive language. We know that there's pathways. We know that there's, it could be that certificate, but it's associated with whatever career they're selecting. And really the key is they have to do something. We know that simply having a high school degree limits an individual's earning power and contributions back to our community. And if we can get some sort of additional post-secondary education in any, in a trade or, advanced degree and anywhere in between, that will have a significant impact on both that student and their family and our community.
Can I just add to that, because it's so true. Not every kid wants to go to college. And last fall, Say Yes started a program working with 4 of the universities on various certificate programs, especially auto mechanics. You're all hearing about how hard it is to get your car repaired because they don't have enough technicians. So that's a big one. Also building and nursing certificates, but 4 of the colleges are invested, and that's going to be increased this coming year.
And we're already working with Fawn and VOA, because as they stand up that young adult shelter, we're wanting to make sure that the kids coming out of street homelessness or young adult homelessness, they're getting connected with the community colleges with an understanding of what hope and future is. And so really that's a population that really in 2 years or less can transform the adult landscape of homelessness. And we received some word from an individual in Cleveland that said some of the persons in their kind of rollout, this foster care aging out population resonated with them. And they actually built an entire dormitory just for foster kids that would allow them to have independent supportive housing while they were continuing whatever education choice at that local institution. And those are kind of things that really is creating that overall system that I think is exciting to see.
Okay, I've got one last question because I know we're already over time, so I appreciate everyone. But so looking at the family support specialists, those are kind of at the younger age group, and looking at what potential post-secondary is. Having 2 kids recently have gone through high school and looked at all this, everyone's like, well, we've got the high school career counselors. Okay, there's 2 per high school, which is not enough. So how are you then helping to address that with, kind of that junior high, high school to help them, see what their passion might be?
Yeah, that's part of the whole pipeline from birth through post-secondary completion that we work with our communities on. The services look a little different in every community based on the programming that already exists and what we can build on. So for example, in Cleveland, they had a relatively small nonprofit in town called College Now that was doing post-secondary advisement in a number of their high schools. That got scaled to all the schools. So they have literally added through the services that have rolled out under the umbrella there, rolled out an additional post-secondary counselor in each of the high schools. In addition to that, they've been building on the professional community, and all of the students, as they're starting their journey with exploring colleges, have a mentor in the business community that's helping to guide them. Usually those are tied to areas of interest for the students. And those mentors stay with those students all the way through post-secondary completion. So it's a long-term commitment they're making. In the case of Cleveland, they're providing prompts to those mentors twice a month. Most of it is done online so that it can be monitored. And that serves as another point where we know whether a student's on track and whether we need to intervene and get additional supports to the students. So that's been a critical piece. That's scaled now to where they have somewhere around 2,000 professional mentors working with students that are going on to higher ed institutions there.
As we work within our local community and work with our nonprofits and our business community, take a look at the data where the gaps are. I mean, that's where this is a community leadership driven model. The community is going to drive the decision making on where dollars are invested and the programs that get scaled. We as Innovia are simply by providing the backbone support and the fundraising support to get this thing launched. But the operating, our operating committee will start meeting in February and will continue to meet then every 2 to 3 weeks. We'll be establishing a leadership council, which would be the level that you're all at, that will allow you to join every quarter to receive an update on the progress of our work. And we're doing baseline data so you can actually see how we're improving as a community on our identified metrics. And so this is very much community-driven model, and we're just providing the support to get it kicked off and launched and started. I know we're almost out of time, so let me share with you this, and then if there's anything else you want to find out or ask, we can go there. We are officially launching publicly on March 14th. We've been working on this for a couple of years, as you all know, since we've been having this conversation for a while. We actually launched the first time with Sam. March of 2020, and then due to COVID had to step back. So this is our relaunch, and we're kicking off the fundraising. We're anticipating that we have to raise around $150 million for the scholarship. That number is being validated through the data modeling process right now. And will be updated when we have that finished and wrapped up. Our goal is to actually launch with half of that raised on the 14th due to incredible generosity of our community. As we've talked about this, I hope you can see local elected officials are a critical part of making this whole initiative work. I mean, as you know, there are so many dollars for community supports that go through city and county government. And I'm a little biased. I love county government. I think that it's just important to have elected leadership at the table. And so we just feel it's important to share with you. So thank you for letting us take an hour of your time to make sure you're fully engaged with the initiative that is happening. We used to say it's getting real. Well, it's real. And we've had some incredibly generous donors already step up to help seed the initial scholarship fund. So we'll be making that launch. We have a fundraising, the fundraising committee is meeting now. We have a marketing committee that's meeting. So we'll have our official name. We did hear through the process that people don't like the name Say Yes. Great. We're going to have a new name that can be owned by our community and reflect our community. The operating committee I mentioned is meeting and and we have, I think this is really important for you to know. We have done so many community meetings over the last 3 years. We met with pre-March 2020, met with over 650 people to just say, do you want this? And the community said, yes, they wanted this. And then this past fall, going through, actually this week, we're holding more focus groups. So we've had parent voice, student voice, business community voice, faith leaders, nonprofit leaders, elected officials. I mean, we've been really intentional of making this community, bringing the community together, because it is truly going to be a community-owned process. So we hope you'll mark your calendars for March 14th. We'd actually love for you to all be part of that launch, if it works out for you, but because we think that it's really important that the county be an incredible part of announcing this leadership initiative that will truly transform our community. Any other questions for us?
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add, money is important, and thank goodness you have the support in getting it. Just a word of note, since 2012, the mayor has given $38 million to education and Say Yes. So, the elected officials are important pieces of the project.
Thank you, Ellen. They're an incredible, they just provide, our elected officials provide a leadership to community. I mean, you're elected by the community. And so to have an initiative like this that will truly touch every aspect of our community is, it's just important to have you involved from the beginning. So we just appreciate you taking the time.
Great. Any last comments from my fellow commissioners?
I just had a quick question for our guests from Buffalo. So just if I missed this part, so your rate of students actually first, what year did you start again, the initiative in Buffalo?
2011.
Okay. So you've got about a decade of data. What was the rate of students that went to college pre the initiative, and where are you at today?
So I'll ask Jean to give that exact data. I don't know the exact data point.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
What it increased every year.
I don't remember the exact starting point, but they have gone up, I believe, 16 percentage points since launch now.
Okay. That's great. And then is there an emphasis put on sort of industries or fields of demand? I mean, if your community has a shortage of degrees in field X, Y, and Z, is there an emphasis to encourage students to go into those fields, maybe rather than another field where the job opportunities might not be as good?
Yeah, so there was a significant investment from the state in economic development in the Buffalo region. And there were 4 areas that were identified in that workforce development effort. Pathways have been built out through this partnership in Buffalo in those 4 career areas: medical, advanced technology, hospitality, and I'm going to forget the 4th one.
Okay.
The other thing, Josh, that we're doing is that we are creating the scholarship to actually incentivize students to stay local, to attend one of the universities within our 20-county region. And every student will receive a scholarship, if they choose to go to the University of Montana, but it will actually be different than if they were to stay local. And we're doing that because we know the data shows that if they do their education locally, that they're more likely to stay local. And then it also has an economic impact on our local universities. So it's a win-win if they can stay at one of the universities within our 21-county region.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. French, I see you're on video. So do you have a last comment or question?
No, just taking it all in.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you all very much. Appreciate all the information. I think it's great to have. I've been part of some conversations, but this was really beneficial to hear and know kind of the long-term effect that this can have on your communities. So thank you for taking the time to visit with us. Shelley, I'll let you just do the parting comment. Oh, you just
I
muted.
muted myself, sorry. Mark your calendars for March 14th. And again, I hope you can join us at many levels, because this will be truly transformational for our region. So thank you very much for allowing us to join you today.
Thank you.
Yes,
you. Okay,
thank you all. I appreciate your
Have
time.
a great day.
so.
Thanks, everybody. Have a blessed day.
Bye.
Okay, I see we've got Scott. Okay, so next on our agenda today is Scott Chesney talking about a professional consulting services abstract briefing. So Scott, I will let you take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, Scott. We are before you today to ask for your support on an previously unbudgeted request for professional services to assist us with the beginning of our comprehensive plan update, which is ultimately due to you in mid or June of 2026. Always seems like a long way. It never is. There are a number of steps we have in getting toward that goal. Many of you know the comprehensive plan as a land use document, as something that guides land use and development. It is much more than that. First off, more importantly, in Washington, it is a mandated effort by our county under the Growth Management Act, started in roughly 1990. County's first big plan was in 2001. So we've had about 20 years to see how things have worked. They have not always worked smoothly. The county has been, well, let me back up and say, it is complicated. It is more than land use. It involves actually a very substantial number of our county departments will be touched by this effort as we go through. It is complicated in the sense that when we don't do this to GMA compliance, the group called the Growth Management Hearings Board rules against us. We have been before you, even in my short time here, with a number of actions that have been related to a settlement agreement first initiated in 2013 and signed in 2016, that we are trying to work our way through the elements of which to get ourselves back in compliance with the Growth Management Act. We are close to doing so, and we expect to, hopefully be there in the first quarter, first half of this year. What that means being out of compliance is, among other things, we are ineligible for certain grants, notably from ecology, and that has been true for some time. So getting this right is important for all sorts of reasons, not the least of which is we avoid future litigation. And we provide better, more clear direction to those that want to invest in the county. The reason we're asking for professional services, our planning department there's two reasons. One is we did lose 2 senior people this year, one of which was the chief long-range planner. The other, of course, being John Peterson, the planning director, who was actively involved in long-range planning. The opportunity of losing that is you get a chance to bring in fresh perspectives. Certainly, I'd like to, we're offering our perspective as your new director, but also the idea of having consulting help means we bring in people that have expertise in GMA, lots of experience creating these plans that are GMA compliant for other counties in Washington. We have the chance to piggyback on staff expertise, so we're not dealing with a single individual, but a trained staff, which augments our efforts significantly. And it gives us a chance to kind of swap them out. Certainly on an annual basis, we want to be able to rescope and renew this effort to fit our needs as we move through this series of plans that have to happen. And it's much easier to do that when you're using professional services on a consulting basis than when you're trying to adapt with an in-house planning team only. So we have some real advantages of using this approach. Cost, we believe, is really comparable to if we had senior staff in place to do this between salary and benefits. and the possibility of also using some of these funds for an internship program on the other side of that experience level, but on the usefulness factor, we think it's very cost-effective use of those funds, considering the level of expertise and flexibility that we get with those consultants. The real expectation here is we've got a number of steps to take to get to the comprehensive plan, which in and of itself takes a good long time to work through. And to be sure, the county's comprehensive plan is not completely out of date. It is not obsolete. It needs tweaking. Nobody anticipated the change of work that would go through by remote working and the impacts of COVID, but it also seems clear now that remote work is never going to go away. And Spokane County is in such an incredible position to take advantage of that from a cost of living and a quality of life perspective that we want to be able to show a development plan to investors, potentially those from outside the community, that gives them a clear path to how do I get to an idea, even down to a building permit and a certificate of occupancy. So now is a terrific time to be talking about things. And the very beginning of that is our countywide planning policies, which is our real work plan for this year. The commissioners were recently in the first steering committee meeting. You started to see the scope of work that's going to be done there. And given that it involves all of the constituencies of the county, it is a real team building exercise, but it is clearly going to be led by us at the county and the county board. And that's, again, part of having this expert staff in place is to do that. So that's our goal for the year is the countywide planning policies, and then the start of the urban growth areas update. Because of that settlement agreement, we're trying to time our pattern of analysis for the UGA with getting ourselves back into compliance with the settlement agreement and Growth Management Act. Again, that's a goal for mid-22, and we think we're on track to do that. So that's the basic purpose of it, is to bring on that expertise for this bigger comprehensive plan effort that will take us through 26, involving certainly, building and planning will be at the lead of that, but many departments, certainly budget, the sheriff's department, others, public works to a big degree, all are touched by that, and we will be working with our colleagues and department heads extensively, using our professional services folks with your support. So with that, we would simply say we're looking at this as this year is an unbudgeted expense. We will build this into our budgets in future years, and we would expect this to go on likely through 25. Depending on what workload is left in the first part of 26, we may be past the point of needing outside services. But that we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So that's kind of the update of what we're asking for your support with today. Glad to answer any questions.
Commissioner French has raised his hand.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on some of the things that Scott said. The issue with regard to growth and comprehensive land use plan. I mean, every year the legislature is changing the rules and either creating new mandates, new guidance, new criteria for us to adhere to. And if they aren't changing things, then the hearings board is with their rulings, or the courts are. And so this is a moving target, and you have to adjust your sales virtually every year to be able to keep current with the latest iterations, interpretations, changes that come down the pike and stuff. So I appreciate that we've got somebody with the expertise and background that Scott brings to the county, but the request for outside consultants is not unique. We did it when I was at the city. We've done it when we adopted the comp plan in 2013. They're just expertise that we can't afford to have on staff, but clearly need to have to be able to meet the mandates out of the legislature. The other thing is that there are groups in this state and in this community who make a career out of suing counties, out of finding any kind of opportunity to be able to hinder our ability to grow as a community, and quite frankly, to grow in the way the community wants to grow. They have their own vision of what they think growth should look like, and they will impose their will on counties through litigation, through drawn out processes. And as one attorney says, we look for you to create opportunities for us to sue you. And they do and stuff. So it's just the nature of the game. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that in for your consideration. Thank you.
Just as an aside, in this short legislative session, we are tracking just under a dozen introduced bills that have a direct relationship to Growth Management Act and community development planning.
So Scott, what type of consultants, I mean, is it a consulting firm that deals specifically with land use issues, or are you looking for a independent contractor that would come on? I guess I'm just trying to
we are, Madam Chair, we are looking for a firm that has experience in this, particularly one with a principal level staff that has plenty of gray hair, as they say in the game, that has gone through this enough in Washington that we can, as Commissioner French says, that the result of this is going to be a very tight, very consistent document that is harder for someone to criticize from the outside or from a legal perspective. And to do that, we need a good firm as well. It's not an individual look, it's a firm look.
Okay. And then with that, so because we're still dealing with the issues from 2013, and settlement agreement and stuff. So that's part of the anticipation, is that they will be providing the feedback that we need to ensure that we are doing everything we need to meet the laws, so we're not getting sued. Is that part of what I'm hearing?
Yes, and it's unfortunately that's a defensive posture that we do need to adopt right now, because we have been such a target. With the current team in place, notably, our new folks that have come on in our legal system, our legal staff, we are working our way through the existing agreement in good shape. So what we're looking for is bringing somebody on that can help us navigate those waters and stay in compliance in an otherwise very complex environment. So yeah, they will need to understand the settlement agreement and know that here's the path we can walk to stay safely out of trouble.
And so are you looking for a motion today, or this will be on the 2 o'clock coming up?
I don't, I think, officially know the protocol. We're looking for your support in some way that we could then carry this on with Scott's help to Gary Petrovich and figure out a way to make this happen.
Scott, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thanks, Commissioner Cooney. This is an advanced briefing. It's not on a consent agenda yet. We wanted to have Scott come and discuss the need for his team, acknowledge that it was not a budgeted item. If there's support for doing it, then Scott and I would work back with Gary to see how we would fold it into the budget, and we would bring it forward on a future consent agenda for the commissioners. It would be a approval for an RFP, if I'm not mistaken.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, so in the previous work under the Growth Management Act, as we updated our comprehensive land use plan, there were funds available from the Department of Commerce or from state that would help pay for these outside consultants. Unfortunately, those funds have dried up and are no longer available. So jurisdictions have got to carry that burden on their own and stuff. So, it's part of the old adage, you pay me now or you pay me later. You either hire good consultants to keep you out of court, or you hire good attorneys to get you out of court. And so I think what Scott is proposing is that we trying to be proactive and try and get ahead of the situation by bringing on some outside consultants that can help us navigate through this process.
Very good, thank you. No, I'm in favor, because I definitely don't want to be in the situation we were, in the past, so I'm just trying to figure out, do we need a motion today, or it will show up on a 2 o'clock?
We'll bring it forward on at 2 o'clock in probably in the following week.
Thank you.
Yep.
I mean, so obviously you've got, I don't
Thank
know
you, commissioners.
what Josh is, but I mean, if you just need head nods too to move forward, I mean, I think you've got at least 2 of us.
You've got 3. I completely see the importance of this.
So,
Thank you, commissioners. Thanks, Scott.
thank you. Appreciate it, Scott. Mr. Chesney, I should say, since we've got both Scotts on up there. Thank you for presenting to us today. With that, that is the last item that we have on the agenda, other than miscellaneous or other matters. Does anyone have any miscellaneous or other matters? Seeing none, then we will adjourn and we will reconvene at 2 o'clock for our 2 o'clock consent agenda. It is 10:17. Thank you all. And I'm not sure if I said on the record that all 3 commissioners were here this morning, as well as our executive management team. So just in case I didn't, everyone's been here all day so far. Thank you.
And you did.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Yeah.